Hi, Democrats. Today is Wednesday, March 29th, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Life. Happy Wednesday. So today's word of the day is comparison. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things, just how we compare, how we line up with other states and stuff like that. So in New Mexico, they just passed a bill that would allow for free lunch for every school kid in New Mexico. Free lunch for every school kid. Instead of like giving kids whose parents are having difficulty paying for a school lunch the scarlet letter by making them go through a special line or having a special card or denying them lunch because their bill isn't paid up. They're just saying, if you go to school, you get free lunch. That's what's happening in New Mexico. What's happening in Oklahoma? Well, they sent out a whole bunch of free lunch cards, which I didn't even know was a thing. So they sent out the cards for people to use to get free lunch. They sent some out to people who weren't eligible. And so when they discovered the mistake, instead of going through and figuring out the ones that were not eligible and discontinuing those cards, they discontinued everyone's cards. And so children who live in food insecure homes who were dependent on the school lunch cannot use their cards. They cannot access the free lunch until the school board gets everything sorted out. Talk about protecting our students. Talk about protecting our kids. They messed up all of the school lunch cards. And so until they get it fixed, there are some students who will be going without lunch. So comparison. New Mexico says everybody gets free lunch, and Oklahoma right now is saying no one gets free lunch. That's one piece of comparison. Second piece of comparison. Cherokee Nation has license plates. So if you're a Cherokee citizen, you can apply and get a Cherokee Nation license plate that's separate from the state of Oklahoma license plate. Our current governor tried to block that, blah, blah, blah. But what's happened now is Cherokee Nation has taken $7.8 million that they've gotten from those license plates and poured them directly into schools in Northeast Oklahoma. So they took the money and poured it directly into schools to help schools. And that would not have happened if the governor would have prevailed and they would not have been able to get their specific plates. That's a very specific, good example of a government taking the money, the revenue that they're generating, and putting it back into helping its citizens. Take a hint, state of Oklahoma. So that's one piece of very close comparison right here in our own backyard. The city of Oklahoma City, they passed MAPS 4, which is a program to like improve the city. And they started the whole MAPS program just as a reminder or education for people who don't live in Oklahoma County like myself. The MAPS program, which is where they vote for new taxes to fix Oklahoma City, came about years ago when they wanted to look at why weren't businesses coming to Oklahoma City. And what they decided was they needed to improve their infrastructure. They needed to make Oklahoma City more attractive. So when businesses were considering Oklahoma City, they'd have a better shot. So the decision was made that they would improve infrastructure. That was an Oklahoma City sales tax, and Oklahoma City voted for that. Now, on a statewide basis, we've had 3 companies in recent memory, just big companies that we bragged about, we talked about, we did all the wooing in the world. 3 big companies who said, yeah, we're not coming. We're not coming. And they told us why. And some of it was, about our social policies. But instead of doing that, instead of taking folks at their word, they told us why they weren't coming. We've convened this whole new task force that has 10 Republicans, 2 Democrats, this whole new task force to look into why companies aren't coming here. I suggest they start at why companies told us they weren't coming here. And then look at that and figure out what we need to do as a state to become more attractive to big companies. Now, Panasonic passed us up. There was all the talk, Panasonic is coming. Panasonic passed us up. Well, they're looking at us again. Don't know what changed, but they're looking at us again. So it is my hope that our state leadership will take into account why they told us they weren't coming and fix that rather than offering them more tax incentives. Because tax incentives get folks to look. But who we are as a state makes people make the decision. So it's sort of like, a cute girl. The makeup and the hair gets folks to look, but who she is in her soul is what makes people decide to stay or not stay. In Oklahoma, the tax packages look really good, except we keep pushing it down. That was one of the reasons that Panasonic said they weren't coming, is that we had a pretty good tax package, but we wouldn't start paying off until much later, whereas the other state said that they'd pay right away. But they're back. So let's see if we can attract Panasonic and the jobs and the new folks to our community. This one isn't a comparison. This is just something I have to get off my chest. Edmond North, decent school, decent community. Edmond North is a high school in Edmond. Is suffering through a tuberculosis outbreak right now. Tuberculosis. This is a disease that we basically had figured out, or at least had the vaccine figured out. But now we're having an outbreak. And this is because people are believing junk science or won't believe science at all. This is what happens when information isn't allowed to thrive. And so we all have to do our bit to educate ourselves, vet our sources, and make sure that people get the information. Because people went off of vaccines because vaccines are evil, blah, blah, blah. People went off of vaccines. We have high school students who are suffering from tuberculosis. That was addressed largely before I was even alive. But because more parents are deciding not to vaccinate their children, children are having to endure tuberculosis, a disease that we had conquered. And they will likely live through it, because I've had these conversations and people say they lived. But here's what I say about chickenpox. I had chickenpox. I wouldn't want anybody I know and care about to get chickenpox. It was miserable. I lived through it, but it was miserable. If you can skip that step for those that you love, why wouldn't you? Which pushes me over to talk about guns. I told you yesterday I didn't want to talk about it because I'm still pretty emotional about it, but I do have to talk about it. Our so-called reasonable congressman, which is supposedly Tom Cole, he's supposedly our reasonable congressperson. It's a shame and disgusting that we have one that we call our reasonable guy. But our reasonable congressperson is on record saying, and this is following the mass shooting, the deadly shooting in Nashville at an elementary school. Nothing can be done about the guns. Passing laws, putting up restrictions, addressing the issue likely won't make a difference. We have examples. We have examples in the United States where there are communities states that have actual common sense gun laws, and they have less mass shootings. And then you have states that are wild, wild west, and we are all at danger. It is heartbreaking that those children were murdered in Nashville. But I'm going to be honest with you. Nobody Nobody should have to endure a mass shooting. And to look at a mass shooting, to know that 9 children were just trying to get educated, a janitor was just trying to do his job, an administrator was just doing her job, and say, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it, is heartless. And so for anybody who watches me, even if this is your first time, stop calling Tom Cole our reasonable congressman. What we need to accept is in Oklahoma, we don't have one. We do not have a reasonable congressman nor a reasonable senator. No one who represents us in Washington is reasonable. Several of our representatives have not even acknowledged it, And our so-called reasonable guy said, there's nothing that can be done about it. We've got to change who represents us. We've got to make sure that everyone we know is registered to vote. Everyone we know gets information so that they can be educated. And everybody we know knows when the next election is. Elections have consequences. Even the elections that no one shows up to have consequences. All the people who want to be all over Facebook and Twitter complaining about Ryan Walters, that's a result of an election. Elections have consequences. We have to show up for every election. We have to make sure that everyone we know shows up for every election. And it'd be great if they were educated when they got there and they didn't vote based on the D and the R. They voted on what the people say that what they stand for. And most of our people are running for re-election. They have a record. We know what they stand for. Most of our congressional representation did not acknowledge the shooting. I guess because it's old hat. And then Tom Cole said, it's likely that it wouldn't make a difference. That's where we are. County elections are coming up. District elections are coming up. State convention is coming up. Please get involved. Thanks for joining me. And I'll be back here tomorrow at 4:15. You guys have a great evening.